I'm going to quickly introduce you all. Obviously, you all have checked out their bios on the AirMeet platform when you were registering, but let me make an informal introduction for you folks about who these people are. Starting with Ritam, I think Ritam has been like my, let's say, role model into community building, because he has been building a community of creators since more than a decade, and how they run India Film Project. And this year, I mean, they built like a massive virtual festival, and it's just super. Like Ritam, this is like an inspiration and idol for me for replicating how community building is and how to bring people together. That's Ritam Bhatnagar for you guys.
Pawan.
Moving on to introduce you all to Shivani. Shivani, I am very sure if you all are interested about the internet, you must have heard about Internet Freedom Foundation. Shivani manages the community and operations at Internet Freedom Foundations, and I think these folks are doing some brilliant work. Even if you just go and follow them on Instagram or Twitter, you will know it's important to know about data privacy, internet policies, and everything that's happening out there on the internet. So just go check out what Internet Freedom Foundation does. Thank you so much, Shivani, for coming on this on a very short notice. I mean, I think
No,
I'm going to
thank you
repeat
so
this.
much.
I'm going to repeat this to every panelist. Ki thank you so much for coming on such a short notice, because that's how I was throughout this week. Moving on and introducing to the audience to Anshul Tiwari, again another person who has been. I've been writing on Youth Ki Awaaz when I was like in school, college, high school that time. So having him today here on the panel and talking about community building, which I think all of us here are very passionate about, it just feels very. I'm at a happy dance kind of emotion having Anshul here on this panel. Anshul
Thank
is
you.
the founder and editor in chief of Youth Ki Awaaz. I mean, some brilliant content, some a brilliant community out there again from India. Thank you so much, Anshul, for being here on this panel.
Thanks so much for the lovely introduction.
Moving on to Richa. Richa is the CEO and co-founder of Blogchatter. She comes from Pune, like the city that I am also from, and I really love the work that she does. And she recently taught me that how blogging is still relevant in the age of social media, videos, and podcasts. And we're going to know more from her about this throughout this conversation. Um, Starting with my very first question, and I want to know some quick insights from each one of you about this. Let's say somebody who is in the audience today here, or watching this on YouTube or wherever, if they want to build a community from scratch today, what are some top metrics, or let's say key metrics, that they should keep in mind before they want to start building their community? Because when I started building platform for artists, I never really knew what community building and community organization even means, right? I mean, I never had a degree or understanding of it, or even the material that's out there today on the internet about it so much. So who wants to start with what should be like the top key metrics for building a community from scratch?
Okay.
Ritam, if you want to go first.
Yes. So, Pawan, I think uh, this is a very late realization that happened to me just 2-3 years ago, when we were already 6-7 years into making a community. And I probably for a good 7 years, I was looking for a metric to know how well we were as a community. And every time we used to think, is the number of followers how you probably calculate it online, or is it how many people actually come down when you are doing something on ground? So does it transform? So different kind of things to see what exactly a community can be put on a objective scale. I think this realization happened to me very late and very hard, that unfortunately we can't measure communities in terms of success, because the entire idea of a community is more of an emotion and less of a business objective. For me, the realization happened when I think seventh or eighth edition of IFP, when I met one team who started from the very first edition of IFP. They got more people as and when they kept on participating. And in 2018, which is yes, eighth edition, they won the National Film Award for their feature film amongst all other languages, and that was a huge realization. So you don't believe in a power of what you are doing until unless one day people tell you that I have been part of what you have been doing, and that has helped me achieve XYZ in my life. Now, how do you metrify it at the end? So I think for me, the success stories that I hear from people when they share, usually you get those sweet DMs on your Instagram or
Yeah.
your email telling you about, and you guys did the flea, and I was reading the comments that you did. You got a lot of people who are just appraising you. So I think for me now that has become one of the metrics. I've just started looking at it more subjectively, saying
Yeah.
the more love you get is the more community that you are building, better community you are building. People are bonding. That means people are
Yeah.
connecting, people are collaborating, and they are achieving something for which they had come to you. And I think
Yeah.
that's the end purpose, to look at it from that point of view.
Noted. Richa, if you want to go next and tell us about what might be the key metric for starting a community from scratch.
Actually, a lot of what Ritam said, I had also sort of concluded. Um, I think the personality of the community is really important. What is it that you want to stand up for? And you take, like he said, it's very emotional. You and that emotion becomes a collective conscience of the community, and it's there are always many ways that you can test whether the community resonates with it or not. That's one. But from the beginning, there's one metric that I have been keeping track of a little, which is what percentage of people interact with us at least once a week. So, because I was not the kind of person who wanted to do a very wide community impact, so followers and number of people were not really something I was interested in, but cohesiveness of the community, how much are they engaged with what we do, was important. We've done sampling, we've used tools, of course, like website tools, social media tools to understand. And a healthy 64% is what we usually fly in. It sometimes increases, sometimes goes down. But that's a good number to see that what you're doing is bringing back people. Like I have this one line that I explain even in workshops when I take that a startup should look at the ratio inversely, which is greater number of new users is to old users, but a community should inverse this ratio after a while and see that how many of the old users are coming back to you, and that's where I feel the community's success lies in. So I'd say the interactiveness would be important.
Wow.
Great. Yeah, I mean, some words, heavy words, cohesiveness, and the ratio and
It's
all of
only English, it's not jargon. It's only
Anshul, if you want to answer about what would be some key metrics if somebody has to start building a community from scratch, because in 2009 is when Youth Ki Awaaz started, right? And it's
2008,
been,
yes.
yes, it's been more than a decade. So, what
Yeah.
would you define as some key metrics?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think everything that Ritam and Richa said holds true. I think communities tend to center themselves around a passion point and a purpose. So I think if you're coming together for for a common purpose, it's actually it requires a bit of hard thinking, but you can actually come up with a metric to measure whether you're able to collectively meet that purpose or not. So, for example, at Youth Ki Awaaz, we often run campaigns. We run campaigns on various socio-political issues, social justice issues. One of the key metrics that we kind of measure whether our community is coming together on it or not is that when we talk about X issue, how many members of our community are raising their voice on that issue, right? And how many of them are actually taking it forward on their social media? Because one part of social media is, of course, YK, but YK is not all of social media. So how are they translating that into the conversation that they're having on their spaces that they are creating for themselves? And with a bit of effort, with a bit of technology, of course, you can measure all of that. But I think one very important aspect of community development and community, harnessing your community in the way that you can actually evaluate and measure it is to make sure that, like I said, they are purpose driven, that there is diversity, because creating a homogeneous community is not going to actually lead to a lot of impact or meeting your purpose. It will make it even harder for you to measure your community. I think the intra connectedness of a community, are your community members sorry, talking to each other, or are they only talking to you? Because that's a very, very important aspect of building a solid community. What happens sometimes is communities end up forming around a person or the person's ideas, or an organization or the organization's ideas. And they end up only talking to the organization and not so much to each other. So it's not really a community until there is intra-connectedness. And I think there is a way to measure intra-connectedness as well. And I think for anybody trying to build community, what Richa said as a point, and I think that translates into multiple other aspects for us as well, which is that how often and how keenly are you listening back to your community, what they are asking for, or what are the problems that they are facing, and all of that can be documented. I think that's a brilliant measure of whether you're able to build a successful community or not. If you're actually getting feedback from your community in terms of what their expectations or what their challenges are, and why they really come to you. When they're coming to you. Like, for example, the point that Ritam made, I think that's a brilliant point. That if somebody is finding a pathway to an eventual success because of being a part of a community, that's an example for everybody who's a part of that community. But we need to hear that from our community. That when I was a part of this happened. So I think that's common for a lot of us, like Ritam and Richa. I also hear back. I also get DMs, and I'm just taken aback, and I'm blown away when somebody says that I published this story 3 years ago and I completely forgot to tell you, but this actually happened. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is brilliant. So I think and that's when I also realized that it can't be arbitrary. We have to create a channel where we regularly hear back from people. So I think if anybody building a community can do that as well, it's a brilliant way of building the right metrics around your community development.
Yeah. Anshul, I might be one of those person who DMs you and lies in your DM request sometimes. But glad that finally you're here and this conversation.
Anshul is only making you feel old from the moment one. I'm telling you, because he's making you feel old out.
I'm telling you, I have like childhood stories with Youth Ki Awaaz, so that's why it's like. Like
I was a child when I started Youth Ki Awaaz, so it is I've aged. I don't know how much.
But great, Shivani. Moving towards you, what do you think are, let's say, some key metrics for building a community from scratch?
Yeah, I think all of them have already covered everything that I wanted to cover. So yay. But I will add on a little bit to it as to how we've shaped IFF's, sort of internal metrics is to see how we're doing community-wise. I think one of the major, obviously, tools to understand how you're engaging with the community is social media. And with apps like Instagram and Twitter, that has become super easy, right? To gauge how many people are interacting with your post or a tweet. So that part gets taken care of fairly easily. Some of the other metrics that I personally look at to gauge growth is one. So IFF follows a very unique membership model, and which basically sort of looks at recurring monthly donations. I think one of the things that we have seen through effective communication with our supporters is that membership base has increased a lot, especially since COVID. So that is the one other metric that we use to gauge how much we've grown. And I think my personal favorite is how many people are reaching out to us to volunteer with us, asking for internships, to work with us. And I will tell you, I think since the past year, it has reached a stage where almost every day we get like 1 to 2 emails wherein with inquiries, right? With internship inquiries or with volunteering inquiries. And I think that for me is the biggest example of the fact that you have a resilient community. Because I think the minute someone wants to invest time and energy in building your work and like when someone identifies with your mission statement that much, I think that's a huge win. So these are the 3 things that I primarily look at when I try to gauge how we're doing, how's our growth. And I think one important bit would definitely be to revisit your strategies, say every quarter, so they don't become repetitive, they don't become stale. So a lot of that stuff comes into play.
Yeah, I think one point that you mentioned was to how frequently and you communicate to the entire community is something that's very, very important. They feel heard, and they feel that okay, we are keeping them in the loop and all of those things. I think as community managers and builders, that's one thing that's very, very prominent. Something that I want to know from all of you guys is that I mean, Ritam and the India Film Project and Anshul and Youth Ki Awaaz team, they have annual big festivals or big events and like an yearly kind of event. So how important is having that sense of belonging in the community through like an offline space? Because during 2020 and during this pandemic, I think it has only been about building remote communities and online communities through Facebook groups, Clubhouse or let's say Slack and all of these different internet tools. How important is that aspect of having a physical event or let's say like a summit, to have that sense of belonging instilled in the community? If maybe let's say go again in the same flow. Ritam, if you want to go first.
Okay. So I remember something that Brian Solis, the futurist, says. He says that community is about doing something together that makes belonging matter, right? So at the end, the idea is how do you make people belong, and this knowingly or unknowingly, the way we do, say for example, India Film Project each year, and it happens annually. I think it makes community a little bit more of a human thing because people actually get to see and touch and feel what kind of people other community members are looking like. Because when people are interacting online, everyone is just a username. There is no empathy in the entire community. There is no collaboration which can happen. So the collaborations online are minimal versus what happens when people meet on ground. So, for example, at IFP we started doing one thing which is called a mixer. So, mixer is a every hourly space wherein editors get to meet editors, musicians get to meet musicians, cinematographers get to meet cinematographers. So, we started doing something with just an experiment with a space for 100 people to sit in 2017, and we thought, okay, let I doubt 100 people would even come for something like this, but eventually even till day it is one of our largest stages, and it occupies 500 to 700 people every hour, just because people want to see, and probably they also look for some kind of validation that comes across, because it's not very often that you get to meet like-minded people. You don't walk into a cafe and meet like-minded people that easily. But if I'm in a room, if I'm an editor, and if I'm in a room full of editor, I think that's the best space I can be, and I can probably see if they have the same opportunities, if they have the same problems, if they understand the trends the same way, if someone is looking for work, if I am looking for someone. I think all of that suddenly opens up, and then they are into an area which they are not going to get judged into because everyone is in the same boat at the end. So I think the on-ground part becomes the human part of it, more non-digital feel of it. It's like getting on a call versus meeting someone. So the meeting someone part, that the kind of feelings that come in when you're actually going to meet someone, the happiness that you have suddenly, or probably the excitement that you have, that comes in on ground. And I think for us, and even for Youth Ki Awaaz, or every community that meets on ground, that's a boon, and we have to probably it's a boon that has we haven't done enough to get that kind of thing together.
Yeah. Would love to hear from Richa now about what she feels, and do you feel that there is a need for hosting like an annual summit for Blogchatter community?
Honestly, we've not done that, so that would be my first thing. We've had like a host of meetups across country which are very purely organic, and we encourage it. But I definitely understand the benefits, and Ritam is quite correct, because a lot of our community members have been asking us, and it's been 5 years now. We did do a couple of retreats which functioned very well, but at a logistic point of view, running an offline event is also extremely time intensive, energy intensive. So we've not done that, but I would love to hear other people's thoughts. But I can say in one line that they work wonders for the community, that's for sure.
Got it. Anshul, if you want to share about how hosting that annual summit and event helps building a strong sense of belonging in the community, would love to hear that.
Absolutely. So when I started YK, I used to think that internet पे सब कुछ हो सकता है, तो मिलने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. But I was wrong, because I think at some point I realized that there is actually a very deep value in putting a face to the community that you're building. And I think it's so important to meet the community that you're a part of and that you're trying to build, because you actually get to share real emotion with them, in a physical space, right? And I think that's what binds them more together. So what YK does is that we used to do several events a year. There was our flagship YK Summit. We had a state event called Converge. We had writers meetup. We were doing a ton of things, and that was a whole stream that we had built out, a whole team around it, and all of that. Complete logistical nightmare. I completely agree. But when you're on the event, when you're actually there, it just seems all completely worth it. But I think the biggest value that an event or a physical meetup ends up adding to your community is that it really makes you meet people who may not be as active. Like for us, there were people who were not active writers on the YK platform, but they would come for every single event that we were organizing. They would come for every single event. They would ask questions. They would suggest topics that they want to talk about. They would suggest speakers. So we kind of realized that we see our community in a very in a single kind of a directional way. कि YK community means लोग आएंगे, लिखेंगे, पढ़ेंगे, आगे बढ़ेंगे. But that's not the case. There are people who are using YK for different things. There are people who are expecting different things of the organization and of the other members of the community, and that we only found out when we started meeting them. So now there are people who just literally come for events, never write, and there are people who always write, actually don't turn up for events. So we have very diverse communities, and we started slotting people in the kind of action that they're happier taking. And you also mentioned about COVID, because I do want to say one thing, which is that yes, COVID kind of forced us into doing online events, and it was like death by Zoom. But I think one of the things that's going to happen is that when things are better and when people start actually going out, people will crave more events, because we are now suddenly wanting to meet more people. We're suddenly now wanting to learn more. We've understood the value of human connection probably more than we did before. And interpersonal relationships have changed completely because of COVID.
Yeah.
I feel people will want that a lot more, and it's a wonderful integration into any community building process. Complete logistical nightmare. So just tie up with a cafe and do it at the cafe. Don't in an auditorium. It's a huge mess. But it's totally.
Ritam organizes like a massive fest, so he was laughing about when you said
I was so
logistical
happy. I was
nightmare.
like validation done.
I'm gonna move.
Anshul, what he said, night, it makes a lot of sense. This is the right time, because the way people have realized the importance of having real connections, real human connections, and also a time when people are now more open to meeting strangers, unlike what we were a couple of months back. I think this is that time that anyone should be just probably, even if you have a small group, it's good time to probably just take it to the next step.
And when Anshul, you were also mentioning about some people write but don't turn up for events, and then some people just turn up for events but don't write. I think that data for as a community leader and as a founder is sometimes really really weird to just gauge. And I completely feel when you say that. I'm gonna move and ask to Shivani, because Shivani, how do you think can internet instill that sense of belonging? And I'm not very sure if IFF does an offline annual event or a monthly event, but how is it?
So we used to pre-COVID. Our flagship event is our Seva Privacy event based on a landmark judgment of the Supreme Court in 2017. Honestly, towards the beginning of 2019, when I first joined IFF, I had a list of things. I had events planned every month. We wanted to do office meetups. We were going to go all out. And that did not work out very well. So I will say that we do want to move more towards physical events after, it's safe for everyone. But currently, like historically speaking, IFF has done more digital events than they have done physical events, because as soon as we started building our events sort of vertical, apart from the 2 landmark events that we would do, we just went digital. So our roster of digital events is higher, but I do agree with something that everyone has said here, right? I think physical events also sort of form as a channel to meet new people for just your community as well. So that leads to a lot of intra sort of community bonding, like Anshul pointed out. So definitely a better way. A lot of investment goes into physical events, but I think that if you can somehow sort of get that balance between physical and digital events, there's nothing like it, because then you're doing both. Obviously, when the former is just safer to do.
Yeah. Got it. I think I'm gonna ask this question to Anshul and Ritam, both of you, and I want to know how do you because it's been more than a decade for you both building these communities. How do you make sure that how do you scale it, or how you are gauging the growth of it? Is it entirely analytical sometimes, or it's also very personally driven, because not always you can take a decision that, whether you want to do this event, whether you want to do this content or something like that. Sometimes it's also very personal driven, because okay, community building is also, let's say, a very passionate process to go through. How do you both, make sure that the community is growing, and how do you gauge that growth? Who wants to go first? I'll leave that up to you folks.
Anshul, if you would want to.
Sure. I don't mind. So Pavan, I think I think it's a mix of everything. Of course, there are some higher level metrics that you need to keep in mind. How many, like for us, for example, how many people are writing? How often are they writing? What are they writing about? What is the trend on that front? And then kind of take decisions to impact that. Like for example, in 2016, we realized that gender and sexuality was a very big topic on YK, massive, hundreds of people writing every week. So just to kind of bolster that, we started organizing events on that subject, and a lot more people started coming together. We started doing workshops on it. We started organizing a lot of information on our website in a very different way, so that people can consume it differently, and so on and so forth. Then similarly, we realized towards 2017 that mental health had become a very big subject. So we tied up with WHO, did a mental health event, and so on and so forth. So I think there is the high level data that everybody needs to look at when they're building a community, and then take decisions basis that. But I also think, as somebody who's leading the community, you're also supposed to be a bit of an entrepreneur, a bit of an innovator, a bit of somebody who has to stay ahead, of just the data. And that's what really makes sure that the community does not plateau, because communities can plateau like this. Like, you do the same thing over and over again, 2 years, 3 years, and somebody else will come in, they'll build a better community, they'll do this and that, and blah, your community is gone. And that's okay. I think that's the thing about communities. Like that, it's not like a, constituency that you, as a politician, you have to hold it together. It's a community. People will come and go. But I think obviously, like for somebody who's developing a community, it's important to be a little bit perceptive as well of what's the trend going to be like, which is the audience that is not getting tapped into, which is now discovering your subject, for example. Like, for instance, for the lack of a better example, we don't have TikTok anymore. But when TikTok came in, it gave way to content creators that were not the norm on social media, right? It broke the hegemony of the content creators on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. It paved way for more people to feel like they can create their own content for themselves, right? And it became a really solid community. A TikToker would connect far sharper with a TikToker than with like an Instagram person or somebody on Snapchat, which is like far more elite and things like that, right? It became a thing. But now TikTok is not there. Obviously, the community kind of got completely dispersed. Many organizations, many platforms tapped into it. Many people thought that, okay, let's build an app that's specifically for this community. Instagram introduced Reels and so on and so forth. But I think the biggest learning that we get from a place like TikTok is that there was a huge population which was joining the internet and was going completely untapped because nobody was thinking 5 steps ahead. What is the new age user of the internet going to want, right? So similarly for your community, I think one thing that cannot be measured by data is your perceptive understanding of what is it that your community will want 5 years down the line, 2 years down the line, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind as you go about figuring out the like how to grow or how to expand or how to diversify your community based on data or perceptive knowledge.
Yeah, I think two things very important that you mentioned. One is, how to, the data cannot tell you what your community will need 5 years down the line. And that's why constant communication between the members and, listening from them, taking their feedback becomes like a very, very important thing. Second thing, what you mentioned about community is not like politicians holding their constituency. I think I'm going to tweet that post this session. But Ritam, would love to hear from you now about what you think, how to gauge the growth of a community.
So I think the first few years we did try to probably put a roadmap to the community. So each month, every quarter or once a year, we used to make a plan saying that 2015, this is what let's do for the community. 2016, let's do this. And then we realized that we were being like a constituency. We were being the people who were deciding for a huge chunk of people, and we had no power and no authority and probably no super space for us to do that. So something that we started doing very consciously is that we started listening to people from the community, and that made a huge lot of difference, because when people come to you with ideas, they usually come from with no malicious intention, right? They come with a very pure feeling, saying that. So, for example, I remember 2019, someone told us, "You guys are doing so much for films, and you are doing so much for writers and storytellers. Why don't you do something for musicians?" Uh, had we planned it and had we not thought about it, we had thought about it. But were we confident about it? I don't think so. So the moment we got this, we went out and started asking people if this is something that they would want. And probably that's how 2020 we started the music challenge for people. So I think one learning for me has been that hear people out, even if those are silly messages, they are silly Insta DMs that they send across you. The next what next is going to happen, and Anshul exactly pinpointed it, that you need to be thinking the next 3 or 5 years of what you are going to look at, right? So example, today we can't be thinking about things that are already happening. So for example, 2025 might have a very different version of creators, and those creators probably might not want to be in a writing or a video space. They might be into some different space altogether. Are we going to judge it? Probably our judgment might be wrong. But are we going to hear it from the community? I think that would be the best thing for us to do. So in last 10 years, one of the key learnings has been keep listening, keep talking to people. What I do, and still as a habit I've kept it, is that whenever someone sends us across an email or a DM, and random weird suggestion, someone just sent a message, why don't you do something for actors? So at least one person from my team reaches out to them, understands them, what exactly are they trying to do. Of course, if it looks valid thing, and understand what are they suggesting. And I think that has helped us build things. So we keep on noting such things down, and then we make an annual plan. So for example, the plan for 2021 is already ready. So we know what are the things that we are going to do each quarter for the community. And that has come from the community. And for the next year, we will collect a lot of thoughts this year, which might go into execution next year. So I think that makes it, one, it makes it self-sufficing. Second, I think it makes it people-driven.
Yeah. I think I've got a very interesting question here in the chat, and Richa, there's something that I want to ask you, and also because the question that we are picking from the audience, these audience members are going to get like a free subscription of Pepper type product that we have built. I'll tell you guys towards the end what this tool is about. So Deepak is asking, talking about community, do you think Discord or Clubhouse is a great way to form a community? And because we know you have been using Clubhouse actively, I've been seeing that on your IG stories. Tell us if that's like a good tool to, form a community. Richa, I think you are on mute.
It's like Hotel California. Once you enter it, I'm finding it very difficult to like extract myself from that app. So it's actually, exactly what Anshul and Ritam also have been saying. As entrepreneurs, you also have to view the trends. You have to see very small breadcrumbs that happen around you. Where are the people moving? What are they doing? And because big stories don't happen overnight, they start really small, and the ones who tap into it are the ones who move in the right direction. I think the idea of something like Clubhouse is good because it's very democratic, right? Like you can come and have a conversation, like a phone conversation with somebody like Swara Bhaskar on it, or Rahil Khurshid, or all the rest of the people who are there, and at the same time you are learning. So you're building your brand, and you're learning, and you're opening your horizon. Also, I'm a big fan of figuring out international trends. In fact, Blogchatter was one of the ways that I saw something happening on an international platform, and I thought I really have to have it in India as well, which is how we came into the picture 5 years back. So again, Clubhouse gives me an insight. Like yesterday, I was a part of a conversation on future of advertising, and of course, there were a lot of Indian Ogilvy people and agency people who were discussing it, but there were also international social media heads who were a part of the conversation. So Clubhouse is a good way to learn, build your brand. Clubhouse or Discord, either. I've not been on Discord, I can only talk about Clubhouse. And at the same time, understand what are the bits that might happen in future and implement it. While perhaps, the rest of us have bigger communities to manage. We're coming with data analytics and all of that, but every person on the internet is running a community, right? Like that's what the definition is. Your Instagram handle, your Twitter handle, your blog, everything is a community today. So even you at your level would want to learn from these people how to run a community, how to understand it and curate it back. So I think Clubhouse is amazing, and if you want to sacrifice all the good time of your day, please join it, and follow the rabbit. I'll see you there.
Okay, I hope Deepak you found your answer about will it help to form communities or not. Moving ahead with Shivani. Shivani, this is something that I want to ask you about how do build communities which are exclusive or let's say have certain barrier to entries or let's say like a pro membership that IFF has like based on the donations or the members. It offers various content or perks about to the community members. How different is building like an open community and building like an exclusive community?
So I wouldn't say that our membership model is we don't think about the membership model as an exclusive community. It's more to grow our domestic fundraising base, right? So the mission statement there is slightly different. But in terms of the difference between growing, say, an open community and a exclusive one, so to speak, I always think of community building as building open communities, right? Like, I think the exclusive community is a bit of a paradox for me. So I think that I have a lot of experience with building open communities because that's the kind of work that IFF does. In terms of exclusive communities, I'm not very sure. Your mission statement needs to be super clear. If you are trying to build an exclusive community, you need to have clarity on what exactly you're offering that community. So, and they need to be able to identify with what you're saying. That's one. Constant sort of updates on the work that you're doing. So for us, our members are our donors, right? So we constantly update them on the work that we're doing. There's a communication channel that's always open. So that's really important because that's also a part of exclusivity, having open communication channels, regular updates, something more than what say the rest of the community would get. So you need to be clear on what you want to build and then take that direction forward.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna move to this one last
Can
common
I
question.
say something?
Yeah, please.
Exclusive communities is also cults, right? Everything that she stated is also cults.
Yeah.
So she's right. There's nothing like an exclusive community. They're cults.
Yeah. And it's also important to see how, and I think this is from a chat that we were having with Gunjan earlier, where she was saying every creator also today is like building his own community out there, or more like a media outlet for himself or herself when they are creating content. So I think that's also like one, everyone who's in the chat here and in the audience, you all should use Discord or Clubhouse, Facebook group, whatever you prefer, or even WhatsApp broadcast today. Like just create like a broadcast or a Substack newsletter, and it's a brilliant way to build a community. I'm going to move to my last question, which is for each one of you, and this is something that I want to know from everyone here. If I can start with, let's say, Anshul, and Anshul, if you can tell us what is like one of the biggest challenges or difficulties you have faced as a community leader in the past decade and 12, 13 years that you have been building YKA?
So, I've actually had a ton of challenges. I can go on, like we can have a separate discussion for an hour or so. But I think, so I'll not talk organizationally because organizationally there are like a ton of different challenges. I'll talk only personally. I think when you're building a community in today's day and age, when there is like, today there's a Discord, tomorrow there's a Clubhouse. And everybody's suddenly like, "Arey, maine usse baat kahi Clubhouse pe," and Clubhouse is like, I feel exactly how Richa spoke. When I joined Clubhouse, I was going crazy. I was like, day in and day out, I was on Clubhouse, and then now it's updated the app because it's consuming so much of my time. But one of the biggest challenges that you face as a community builder, which is not actually talked about as much, is actually FOMO. And I think that's a really big challenge because you constantly feel that you're going to miss out. You're going to miss out because you should have a Facebook page and you should also have an Instagram profile. Now you should have a Clubhouse room and a Discord server. Why not put a Mastodon server as well and a Discourse community? Like there's just so much happening and people going from here to there and everywhere that you're constantly trying to play catch up. And I think I don't know what the solution to that is. Like for me, the solution has been switch off. Like I've shut down notifications to my Twitter, to my Facebook, to my Instagram, to Clubhouse. And I only do, what is required to be done to just make things move forward. Because sometimes what happens is that there's just so much information out there that you feel like you're missing out on, what next you should be doing for your community and what you should be doing for your community. So I think that's definitely one very big challenge. I think the other challenge is, not every community tends to always stick together. And I think we should know that and we should also learn to appreciate that. I think people sometimes, like community builders, start kind of feeling कि ये मेरी community है तो मुझे इसको पकड़ के रखना है. I can't let them go, right? And that's not how communities are. At the end of the day, it's like, everyday folks who are trying to associate with you over an idea. That idea can evolve for them and they can go elsewhere. And the simplest example is that, a massive number of people left Reddit when Quora started because they were not getting the attention on Reddit, but they got all the attention on Quora, right? So it's always going to happen. And I think that's a big challenge. These are two personal challenges that you need to learn about. I was very protective of our community, and I think it took me a bit to realize that you can't attach yourself so much that you don't let your community grow or beyond the point. So I think for every community builder, it's important to recognize the tipping point at which your community is ready to graduate from you, and look at it more as a graduation rather than they're going to someone else and now they're not going to be mine. So it's never going to happen, right? Like you can't own a community to the point that you control every aspect of their life. So I think those two personal challenges you should be ready to deal with. Of course, if you're doing it as an organization, there are challenges around sustainability of the community. How do you reward that community consistently? And how do you consistently build rewards, which are, of course, for most voluntary communities, most rewards are notional. But notional rewards have to be of really high value. Like they should be really impacting a person's life. So constantly kind of trying to figure out and so on and so forth. So I think those are just my 2 bits on the challenges.
I think those are 2 super bits, and I'm just going to think more about it, to just observe it and maybe speak to you more about it later. Ritam, if you want to go next and tell us about what have been some top challenges and what other community builders here today can learn from your challenges.
Okay, I think Anshul's 2 bits covered everything that we had, all my challenges. I think one of our challenge, in fact, what Anshul said, if I have to build on it, is having too much of attachment with your own community. It's only since last couple of years that we started collaborating with other communities, and that has made a lot of difference in the way people perceive, because it's like a huge membership that they get for a single membership. So people, I think, see more benefits when they are collaborating, and we started doing it late. In fact, I think one of our first collaborations started with Youth Ki Awaaz in 2016, and that's the year we started collaborating for the first time. Before that, we were like, yeah, mera community hai. Why are people probably, slightly being more, how do I put it, more possessive about our people. So that is one of the challenges. Second is about continuous understanding of trends, because we are in a domain, all of us here are in a domain which is completely evolving day by day. So if you miss something, you don't know where to catch up. Have people moved ahead, or have you moved ahead? So you have to completely be in sync with people. So that has been the second part for it. And the third part that I probably think that needs to be worked on is how do you make people grow? How do you become more selfless? So for example, what we started doing at IFP is when we started thinking of ourselves as a platform, and we thought, okay, probably we are a school and we need to think of ourselves as a place where people are bound to come and go, but there is some value that we need to add in their life so that they go with sweet memories. So for example, what is exactly that we are bringing on the table? So we figured out that a lot of people, for example, in the creators community that we run, were looking for work opportunities, and their number one problem was that they were not able to connect with the right kind of people, or they were not able to connect with the brands. And probably a lot of creators are always looking for some kind of work because they don't have jobs. Most of them are freelancers. So we started going back to brands. We started getting more brand driven work for creators, and we built a very interesting business model wherein the brands directly get to work with the creators, and creators get to with large scale brands, and this creator might be someone who's probably just sitting out of, he's a 18-year-old person sitting out of Assam, and but he has amazing skills. So how do we make those kind of connections happen? So I think those three things are something that I've faced as challenges, and probably to an extent we have been day in and day out trying to overcome them as well.
Again, I think one more super answer from Ritam as well about what other people here in the audience can, learn from when they are trying to build their community. Richa, if you can move on and know from you what have been some challenges that the audience members can learn from you.
I think I put these answers together and make a blog post, because that's pretty much end goal of everything.
Richa is looking at this with the perspective of content creation.
Of
Ki how I can say
course.
distribute
And
karo.
all hail bloggers, I will always promote that. So, but I think at a personal level, I think building a community is also very overwhelming for your mental health, by the way. So, for me particularly, there are two big challenges that are still there I'm managing on an everyday basis. First is the imposter syndrome. I think you question yourself at every level. We were fairly young people. There are industry stalwarts around, and you do get scared. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in the audience today also who are spectacularly talented, perhaps far more talented than all of us put together. But you doubt yourself because you really don't know where to begin and whether you're good enough. I do that every day. I question myself. In fact, there is an interesting story when I was offered TEDx. I refused because I was like, I don't deserve it. Why the hell does somebody want me to take to stage and talk about my story? And it took some amount of convincing from a lot of good people that I finally took it up. So I'm just saying that imposter syndrome for anybody who's trying to build a community, whether through their Instagram channel or whether through something as big as Anshul or Beanie or Ritam or Shivani, I think that's one thing that you battle, and it's all right. Cut yourself some slack, accept it. It's a bigger idea than what you've ever done. It'll come to you at its own pace, but recognize it. I think that's the biggest thing. Recognize it. And if there are any women in the audience, let me tell you, South Asian women have scored the highest on imposter syndrome. So I hear you, I see you. This is an input, Anshul, that was told to me at a clubhouse discussion when I had spent 3 hours in it. So yes, that's how I came to know about the statistic. And so that's one. And I think the other one is delegation. Putting a team together is literally like giving a piece of my heart. And the first hire that I did, and the first time I handed over the social media logins of Blogchatter, I broke down because it was like I didn't know how to operate after that, because it's so difficult to delegate work after you've been the everything for that setup. So a lot of you will come to that point, and deciding when and how and who to curate as a team for you will be a very difficult decision. And I can only cry with you. I cannot take that decision with you at all. But but you will have to do that. So for me, it was very difficult. I had burnt out completely. I was putting in another point of imposter syndrome is that you work twice than the rest of the people. So another statistic at Clubhouse have that I have been told. So you will realize that it's coming on your health and it's coming on all the energies that you have. Recognize it, and it's okay. And my last bit is the journey is important. It's all right if you don't make it big. It's all right if you don't make an impact. You will learn so much from it. Believe me, you will become a diamond from the industry if you go and tell someone at an agency level that I was here, I was trying to build a community and I reached at this point. They're waiting for you with like a good opportunity and good job. So it's all right. It's okay. Enjoy the ride.
Richa is sort of taking us to more positive sort of end towards the conversation. Shivani, going ahead with you, what do you think have been some challenges or difficulties that the audience members can learn from you?
I think given the kind of work that IFF does, our challenges were a little different than the ones that my colleagues have described. Right? So if you're familiar with IFF's work, we work in courts. We work with parliamentarians. There's a lot of legal jargon there. But we also do public advocacy. which means that you have to make your work accessible to people, as accessible that you can. And one of the biggest challenges, something that we still struggle with, is making sure that people engage with the work that you're doing, and to make it as simple, as accessible as possible. One of the ways that we went about doing it, and I think what worked wonders for us, was hiring full-time capacity. I think communications, I think people don't realize how important and how time consuming just doing communications is. And it requires someone dedicated to doing it. And that is how we are trying to overcome that challenge. That is how we're making our work more accessible by doing more explainer videos, easier posts to understand, sort of making the best of what these different social media apps have to offer, and adopting a different strategy for each one, right? Because you can't use the same thing, the same pattern that you've used on Instagram, right? Twitter and Instagram have to be two different entities altogether. So that was the first challenge that we faced, and we're still working towards overcoming it. Some of it we're making progress there. One other thing that I've also sort of struggled with is also diversifying our community base. How to create a diverse community of people who come from every end of the spectrum, right? One of the things that I found particularly useful in this case is doing collaborations, which I think Ritam and Anshul also mentioned. Partnering up with people does wonders. Also because you're also making allies within your sector and community, but you're also reaching more people, and that's a really effective way of diversifying your community. And I think one just general thing that has worked really well for IFF is, and this is not planned, but almost every quarter on some team call or the other, we just go under a rabbit hole where we talk about what we can do better and how we can get in more feedback for the community. And it has to be on this sort of feedback session internally has to sort of occur on a regularish basis, because trends also change very rapidly. So for us, sort of doing a strategy for the entire year hasn't worked as much as revisiting existing strategy every quarter has, and just having those open conversations where inviting thoughts from everyone. So those are some of the things that we've worked with and have helped us expand.
I think Richa, I think I'll co-author that blog with you and combine all of these answers, and we'll put it up and publish it on Youth Ki Awaaz. And I think here itself, it completely, just circles.
Can we also take a copy of it for Blogchatter, Anshul?
Yes.
And right, and then we can put the caption on Instagram, and Shivani can send it to her donors. And so
We'll collaborate.
Yeah, this is all us coming in together.
We're finding partners already to work with
all the time. And you know what? Somebody got hired in one of the rooms I was moderating on Clubhouse, literally on the spot. So these kind of things always happen.
My God, I think I would have needed an hour more to take this conversation ahead, but we'll keep it for some time later. And sadly, at this point of time, I'll have to end this conversation, but not without thanking each one of you and sharing these wonderful insights. Which even every time I speak to you folks, I think I'm also learning as a community leader, as a community builder. So thank you so much again today for giving us your time. And I was just going through the chat section right now where everyone was talking about how it's important content creators and becoming community leaders around their content and on social media. And I think and when we share this on YouTube and across platforms, people will really, really be helped by this conversation and these insights by each one of you. So once again, just thank you so much from everyone at the Pepper team and throughout this campaign, all our jury members, the nominees. We just want to thank you for being part of this conversation.
Thank you so much.
And I think, Pawan, you yourself are building a community, and you have just made PFA one of the most sought out communities of India. So though we didn't get the time to also ask a lot of things to you, but
we'll keep that separately. When you folks interview me and you four be the moderators, and I will let it go. We will do that on Clubhouse maybe, where Richa will send us an invite.
Please. Nobody is going to leave from there. I'm telling, and Anshul did the right thing. I'm also going to just delete the app next week. That's the only thing I'm going to do. It's super addictive. But yes, it was good fun. This was a good session, and actually, surprisingly, I picked up some great insights for my work as well. So it was quite good.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much once again. Everyone who's listening to this, we're going to end this session and you folks can interact with all of these speakers, maybe in the lounge area. Shivani, Ritam, Richa, Anshul, do you guys have like 5-10 minutes to interact with people in the lounge area?
Sure.
That would be super.
Sure,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Because some folks had few more questions about
You
community
have
building.
to
And
guide us though how to do it.
Yep.
And fairly tech chat.
Okay, so there would be like a top button here, go to lounge. I'll tell you that. But let me just end this session here, and everyone, we're going to take like a quick 2-minute break and then move ahead with the next panel.